Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of an exposition, particularly of 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 9, all right? That is exposition that I want us to do. Peter, if you would come this way and give me this, please. Thank you, brother. Those books should be given to Mukenya if he comes around, yes? Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to do an exposition of 1 Corinthians 8 and 9. 2 Corinthians. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 9. And then I want us to glean some principles because Unit P3 is dealing with biblical perspectives on giving. Biblical perspectives on giving. Now, Peter, again, can I ask, do they have this file?
Yes.
They do?
Yes.
Good. Because I want to read the questions with you so that we have the questions beforehand as we deal with the unit. That helps you to sort of... so I'm helping you with the questions as well as we go along. All right, okay. Biblical perspectives on giving is what we want to deal with now. Now, question 1 is saying, read 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. Those are 2 chapters. And with a paragraph of explanations of each, okay? Give 4 leading principles which must govern the activity of giving. 4 leading principles which must govern the activity of giving. Now, obviously, what we are saying is there might be very many principles, but we are asking you to give us 4. We're saying then that we cannot deal with every question that is connected to the activity of giving in a church, but we can provide general guidelines, right? General principles, general ideas that we are to think about. And those ideas, those principles then help us to relate also with the whole matter of other corollary, we say, related questions that might come up in that regard. All right. It is out of those principles then that we're going to examine the question of the tithe, the 10%, as it relates to New Testament perspectives on giving. And that's Q2 then, question 2. Discuss the issue of the tithe in relation to its Old Testament functions under the theocracy in Israel. Think of what were its civil bases, who was meant to benefit from its collection. Do these conditions still exist in the New Testament community? Would you argue for or against the paying of the 10% as a legal stipulation? Carefully guard your answers. Now, whenever I say carefully guard your answer, I always mean that question can be looked at both ways. All right? So in a sense, there is no absolutely right answer and there is no absolutely wrong answer. The answer will depend on how you guard that which you say. And that's going to be my class position here with regard to the tithe. I'm going to adopt the position that the tithe is neither wrong, it's not sinful, right? But at the same time, it is not a legal requirement. That's the position. But then how I'm going to guard it, then is going to be important. But we're going to discuss that regular giving, okay? And this special giving called the tithe, not in a vacuum, not in abstraction, but in a context. You understand what I'm saying? We have a context of the so-called prosperity gospel, plant seed. give, and it shall come back to you, for example. Seed time and harvest time, for example. These concepts, as they are bandied around, and how do we relate them then to the concept of a regular offering as well as the tithe in the general structure of the principles or perspectives for biblical giving? So we're going to discuss then the question of the prosperity gospel. Q3 then deals with that. Q3 deals with that. Make a case against the prosperity gospel under the following heads. Make a case against the prosperity gospel under the following heads. 1. Planting seed for financial prosperity. Remember, you're going to do that in the light of the biblical perspectives. All right? You're going to bring those principles to argue against the prosperity gospel. 2. Every one of God's people must be rich. Argue against them. But again, friends, we're going to deal with giving. Remember, we talked about worship, isn't it? In the previous course unit. We talked about worship, and we said worship is particularly formal worship, the gathering of God's people, is everything we do from the time we come into the meeting hall to the time we leave. Everything is worship. That means giving is part of worship. So then we're going to discuss that as an act of worship to God. And so Q4 then, all right. These are very simple questions actually if you think about them. So you shouldn't have a problem with this particular subunit. Discuss giving as 1, an act of personal worship to God. 2, participation in the proclamation of the gospel. Discuss giving as 1, an act of personal worship to God. 2, participation in the proclamation of the gospel. All right, so we have an outlay there, don't we? We do. So if I may direct your attention now then to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. I will read because I think I can read very fast, hopefully very clearly, I trust. And then you will follow. And then usually I read with emphasis, okay? I try to. So when I emphasize something, you might want to underline it, or you might want to just take a note of it there. We want you to know, brothers, chapter 8, 2 Corinthians, verse 1. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. The grace of God. All right? It's a grace. And I'm going to tell you then that giving is an act of grace. Giving is a grace. It's an enablement. It's something God enables us to do. You know, we are all stingy by nature, aren't we? No, we are. I'm telling you, Mary, we are. We are. Let me not say stingy. Let me use the word selfish. Right? Human beings are selfish by nature. That is why we compete for resources. That's why we compete for land. Umevuka mpaka yangu, umevuka hii, twende kwa chief. We are selfish by nature. So for us to be able to truly give, and I'll tell you even by the way, that when we give sometimes, most of the times actually, perhaps all the time, we usually give because we have an agenda. The agenda could be because we've been taught, if I give, I will receive in return. So really it's not a giving from the heart, is it? It is a giving with a motive. You know, I'm planting seed. I'm planting seed. So it's more like, usually what I say is this. My son, Barnabas, is a lovely boy. He's a lovely boy. And intelligent as well, I think. Maybe I'm just biased as a parent, obviously. But Barnabas, he has this habit of showing love, right? I must confess, he loves his mother more. I think all the children do. But he wants to show me he loves me. So he would save money from whatever, his birthday gift, whatever we give him. He has a very frugal habit. So he says, and then one time he comes up to 200. He says, Daddy, you buy something nice for yourself and eat. And I'm thinking, this is really good. And when I buy that thing and eat, I'm remembering him. I'm thinking, that's my boy. But the other day he gave me 1,500. Okay? 1,500. And I said, this is wonderful. But I didn't hear what he said. He's been saving towards a bicycle. Wants to buy a bicycle. I didn't hear that part. Or maybe I heard it and then I forgot it. Then one time we were in the car, wherever we were going, maybe we were coming from church, we had my brother's daughter in the car, and my brother's daughter was saying how his son bought him shoes. And I also bragged. I said, it's not only him. My son gave me 1,500. And Bish was like, no, Daddy. That was towards the bicycle. So that had an agenda, all right? I didn't feel great about it. Well, I thought, well, he's a very sensible young man, but I didn't feel great the way I felt about the 200 and the 100. Because the other one was an act of love, isn't it? There was no agenda attached to it, except love. We rarely do that. We rarely do that. So, what I'm saying is, true biblical giving is an act of the grace of God. It's an act of the grace of God. So that's verse 1. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in, verse 2, for in a severe test of affliction, that's interesting. In a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. Now tell me, verse 2, did they give out of convenience? No. It seems Paul is acknowledging that they had severe tests of affliction. Their giving did not depend on their circumstances. Let me rephrase that. Let me put that differently, because there's a principle here. Number one, I said principle, biblical giving, true biblical giving is an act of God's grace moving upon our hearts. But secondly then, we are saying that true biblical giving is the kind that costs us. It is the kind that costs us. At least that's what Paul is saying here. True biblical giving is the kind that costs us. It causes me pain. Now, I do not believe largely that when we are giving, we are always happy. In fact, when the Bible talks about a cheerful giver, we'll see that. It doesn't mean I have every nice feeling as I bring the 10,000. No, sometimes I've actually made a very difficult choice between a very deep need that I had vis-a-vis the work of God. Last Sunday, Peter was preaching on this church, if you remember. And again, I was addressing the new members. We just baptized 5 individuals to join the membership of the church. And so I was giving a general address with regard to responsibilities of membership. And one of the things we're saying is, look, sometimes we do the work of God with very lazy hands, half-heartedly, thoughtlessly. and you find somebody saying, for example, we are required to say contribute 500 shillings for, say, the instrument project or the building project or for the other thing that involves the gospel purpose, and somebody says, I don't have. But the same individual, if something like a funeral, Jemima has a funeral has occurred, they will go borrow to respond to a funeral, but they cannot borrow to respond to a gospel purpose. You see, it's not the lack thereof, it is what you have prioritized in your life. But what Paul is saying here in verse 2 to these brethren is that in your severe test of affliction, the abundance of your joy, and this is not happiness. It's not happiness here, it's joy. Joy is something deeper. You see, happiness depends on our circumstances, the things around us, isn't it? Oh, I got 10,000 shillings from Mary, who thought, well, Pastor, you've done an excellent job. Like, you know, when I was in Kisumu, right? They gave me gifts there. You know, I got an envelope. And then I also got a condom, a ram, very big one. Slaughtering today if you want to, Pastor, actually. I came happy. I was happy. They valued me. You know, they gave me this gift. And you've done that before in a certificate, you graduate. You gave, and that's happiness. It depends on external stimuli. Joy is something deeper. Joy is something substantial, something stronger. You can have joy even when you're going through difficult moments. You remember Nehemiah, I think it's chapter 3, verse 10. In opposition, being fought from every angle, engaged a very discouraging building project, Nehemiah declares, the joy of the Lord is my strength. Well, Philippians chapter 4, verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, always. Irregardless, as the president of Kenya will say, he never says regardless. He only says irregardless. Okay? Some people have debated whether that's correct English. I think it is. But there you go. So here Paul says it didn't depend on your circumstances. It didn't matter the things that were going on in your life. As a matter of fact, you are being tested with affliction. You are needy yourselves. Yet the abundance of your joy. In other words, the work of grace in verse 1, yes? That gracious activity of God in your heart overflowed, Paul says, in a wealth of generosity on your part. So say, number one then, true biblical giving is an act of the grace of God. Number two, it costs you. Now, I remind you again, this story in the Bible, it's an interesting story. Very interesting story. There's this day when David the king, listen to this story. You might use it as an illustration when you're preaching on giving, right? Particularly on this point. It's good to illustrate a biblical point with a biblical story if you can. If you can't, then you can find another story, but better to have a story in the Bible. David is engaged in a fierce war. It's a fierce battle. I think it's the Philistines on the other end, and the Israelites on this end, and the battle is fierce. Now, in the heat of battle, when there is some kind of a break, right? This army is on this end, and the other army is on the other end. David the king happens to think aloud. You know what to think aloud is? I'm actually talking to myself. I'm not talking to anybody in particular. But he's just thinking aloud. And David says, because he was very thirsty, he says, how that somebody would get me if I would get the water from the well in Bethlehem. He was particular about that well. If I could get, like sometimes they say, if I would have ningepata maji baridi ya fridge. You know? Now, he's not talking to anybody. He's not sending anybody. But there were 3 young men who were near the king. And they had the king. And they didn't tell the king anything. That well in Bethlehem, was behind the enemy lines. So that to get there, They had to fight the enemy, get to the other side, get that water, come back again, fight through the enemy defense to get back to David. And this young man said, the king desires water from that well. We will get him water from that well. They fight their way through, they fight their way back, and they hand over David that water. Do you know what David did with that water? Scripture says David poured that water on the ground as an offering to the Lord. And David said, I will not give unto the Lord that which has not cost me anything. Come on in, brother. And so, what is the lesson? Pick a chair from this and there's nothing in it. What's the lesson David is saying? David is saying, if I drink this water, it will be equal to drinking the blood of this young man. It's too costly, it's too valuable. And something that is so valuable, so costly, belongs only to the Lord. Belongs only to the Lord. And David gives it. And so the principle is there, that in their affliction, their generosity abounded. It costed them. Now verse 3 then. For they gave according to their means. According to their means. This is interesting. Now this would sound like a contradiction of point number 2 or principle number 2, but it is not a contradiction. Scripture does not command you to give that which you do not have. Never. Neither does it command you to give beyond your means. For we are told here, for they gave according to their means, but as an act of generosity. Look at part 2. That was an overflow. The principle is in part 1 of verse 3. You understand what I'm saying? The principle is in part 1 of verse 3. They gave according to their means. But because of their exceeding joy, because of their love for God, because of their love for the gospel, they went beyond their means. But that was the choice now. That was the choice. Can you see the difference I'm making? Verse 3. They gave according to their means. That was what was required. To whom much is given, from him much will be. But if you're not given much, will much be expected from you? That's the parable of the talents. One was given 1, the other was given 2, or is it 4? 2. And the other was given 5. Did the master require equal return? No. The one given 1 was supposed to give 2. The one given 2 was supposed to give 4. So God wasn't going to judge the one given 5 the same way he will judge the one given the 1. According to their means. However, if you give in excess of your means, it's not sinful, but it's a choice you're making. Isn't it? It is the abundance of your love. We sometimes say, oh, he went above and beyond. Sometimes you say, you gave your child a duty in the house, isn't it? And you say, Emily, what I want you to do is clean the house, okay? Make sure the TV stand is cleaned, make sure the tables are okay, and is that okay? Yes, but when you come back, you find they've gone over to the kitchen, did the kitchen as well. Well, if they had not done the kitchen, would you punish them? Because that was in the script. It was in the assignment. They only went above and beyond. Now, the point I'm making is we cannot require people to give beyond their means. But if the grace of God moves on their heart willingly, if they give beyond their means, that's their choice. Not coerced, not cajoled. Now, I say this because, again, remember the cause is renewal and reform. In this town of ours, I've had so many heartbreaking stories. really many heartbreaking stories. One, I was dealing with 4 women from a church I wouldn't mention, who came, they were brought to me because they had been devastated, totally devastated. Because the pastor had told them to give money, borrow 100,000 each. Can you believe it? Because, you're welcome, my dear brother. These are the old boys of Wisdom Training Center. The very first students here. You are welcome to stay, but if your time is up, if you want to go, the books are there. I have 10 copies. All right? If you want another one, you'll tell me. But I promise you 10. I have 10 for you. So whenever you are ready, you can pick them. You're welcome. So here they are. These are poor ladies, all right? Business ladies who themselves are operating on debt. You know, sometimes these businesses we do, a lady has gone to KWFT to borrow a debt to start a business, for example. Another one is simply sold a cow to start a business. Now, these ladies borrowed 100,000 each, and believe me, they didn't tell their husbands. Okay? And they offered as security some household items. So the thing became an issue when the auctioneers came. And now the husbands are surprised. Why are you here? Or the security, this, your wife took this. Where is this money, madam? Oh, we were asked to take it for the church. That is so wrong. Because that is not according to their means. I've also had cases where pastors have actually preached. A lady whose husband has given her 50,000 shillings to go and pay school fees for their child who is in high school. The pastor insists that they must give 10% of that 50,000. To begin with, that is not the lady's money. Secondly, that money was particularly earmarked for a purpose. Thirdly, that lady is not in a position to give 5,000 shillings as tithe because her income is not that much. So the third principle here is people are required to give according to their means, ability. But if they go above and beyond, it's an act of the grace of God. It's an act of their own generosity. But we cannot insist on it. We cannot insist on it. Now, brothers and sisters, that has implications on a wide range of things we do in church. We used to have this system in our church many years ago where we would do a fundraiser, and boy oh boy, we would embarrass people in a fundraiser. You know, somebody will be put on the spot to remove their shoes because they've been fined and they don't have money. Mr. Silas there will be walking around with something, and he stops there. Put something. And then he tells people, anatuangusha huyu. Come on. And the person maybe has nothing more. So all you're doing is you're embarrassing them. It's very unchristian. Can you see what I'm saying? It's very unchristian. So these days what we do is we say to people in church, we have this budget. It's 160,000. It's this 1,000, whatever amount it is. And we say, we want to meet that budget. Can people pledge? Think about, sometimes you tell people, think about the rest of the week, come back next week, and come with a pledge. So some will look at their means, isn't it? What pledge am I able to come up with? And we will cut that budget. We will find 100,000 has been pledged. There is 60,000 more. So we say, okay, how do we deal with this deficit of 60,000? Let's organize fundraisers. And so we say, in 3 weeks from now, please carry a special offering other than your pledge. Because that one's a pledge you made. You know where you get it from, isn't it? The other one, somebody comes 100, 200, 500, 100, 50, 20, and then we collect on that Sunday 10,000. It's 50,000. Another one. So people, even if they push themselves, it's not because we have pushed them, but it's because they feel there's a need to be met, And it is an inner compulsion. You understand? It's a personal decision people make. It's very important. Very important. Because people must only give according to their means, their ability. There it is. There it is. And beyond their means, what's the next word Paul says? Of their own accord. Of their own choice. They decided to give beyond their means. I think that project is so important in church, and I think we will not raise that money even if we try. So we must push ourselves beyond. I will go borrow because I know I can work and repay, but I must meet this need in church. Now that is not the pastor playing on their guilt and playing on their minds. You don't love God more if you don't do this. Lay out the need and then let everybody choose how they're going to respond to that need. Should we encourage them to be liberal with God? Yes, we should. But we cannot sort of make them feel guilty that they're not doing it. That would make us think, those of us who are pastors, how we collect offering, isn't it? Should make us think how we collect offering. Do we do offering in a manner that sort of compels people? Because, by the way, there's a collection of offering which compels you, because when this person is coming this thing and is in front of you. And sometimes people follow where that offering basket is going, so everybody's eyes are on you, Mr. Boniface, and they know you didn't drop something, and then they're putting that mental thought. Next Sunday, do you know there are times, and by the way, I think maybe the last two, we usually have a midweek meeting on Mondays here in church. The last 2 Mondays, I did not give an offering. And that was intentional. And what I do is I include it in my Aman Sunday offering. Alright? So I know I didn't give that offering, I will include it there. But I was sending a lesson because there are people who will not give an offering and they feel bad about it. They feel guilty. They feel condemned. They need to know from time to time that even the pastor sometimes doesn't start to go give offering. There's a sense there that, we're going to pastor. We're with the pastor also. Then if I come and say, please, brethren, let us try and bring something with us when we come to the house of God. They know this is an encouragement, not a command. These are things we do because we are shepherds. You look at your congregation and you say, if I do this thing, it will encourage them. If I do this thing, it will discourage them. And sometimes you make some choices as an example to the people. It's okay not to have an offering. Do you know there are some people who will tell you they didn't come to a fellowship because they didn't have an offering?
Even to the church.
Yes, to the church. I don't have an offering. And the way our church, sometimes the way the pastor just talks about offering. I was in, was that Burundi? Yes, it was Burundi. We came to this church and that was a funny thing. They said, those of you who are paying your tithes, would you please stand? And people stood up. And they said, would you walk forward? We want to pray for you. And the prayer itself, my friends, the prayer was not prayer, it was a sermon to the ones who have not given it. I mean, the pastor was making sure they feel guilty. Yeah. Lord, deliver us from a spirit of stinginess, a spirit of Eve, of eating that fruit. And they say the fruit was the tithe, okay? You've been given all else, but also eating. These people were eating the fruit in the garden. Lord, please, you know. And these ones who have brought the tithe, Lord, show yourself mighty. And that you've been rebuked in the prayer, they have been blessed abundantly. You get the lesson, don't you? Next Sunday, make sure you carry something. So if you don't have it, you stay home. Sorry. So again there, we've got to then look at how we encourage these things in terms of our churchmanship. And then verse 4, can we go on? These people, their love for God. Again I say, did you see verse 1? It's a grace of God, isn't it? It's God working in us. Philippians 2:13. It is God who is at work in you, both to will and to do his good pleasure. So look at the way Paul speaks of them in verse 4. Verse 4, not verse 5, verse 4. Begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. Obviously, this is a collection Paul is doing in behalf of, I think there was a famine in Jerusalem, all right? Very severe famine. One of the worst famines recorded in world history. And so Paul goes around the churches to say, our brothers are struggling. Can we please give to their relief? And the brethren are saying, Paul, please give us this opportunity. Let us stand with our brothers. You see, it is not Paul telling them, look how you are letting your brothers die of hunger. Is this a good thing really? Come on. No, it's not Paul putting them under guilt. It is them. And I will tell you, giving is a gospel grace. Giving, true biblical giving, indicates a heart which God has touched by divine grace. A heart that is touched by the plight of others. And so on and so forth. We got to gather speed here. Verse 5. And this, not as we expected. Isn't that amazing, the concept that comes? Was that number 3? So wait for number 4. Principle number 4. Perspective number 4. And this, not as we expected. But what did they do first? They gave themselves first to the Lord. They gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. True biblical giving only follows the giving of self to God. There cannot be true biblical giving of your substance, resources, if you yourself have not been given to God. You know what Jesus says? Where a man's heart is, there also will his treasure be. Your treasure follows where your heart is. I will tell you later that the New Testament perspective on the tithe is no longer 10%, it is 100%. That's what I'll tell you. God doesn't require 10% now. God requires 100%. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 31. In everything you do, whether in eating and drinking, do all things to the glory of. So even the way I spend my money on food, I'm thinking about God. You know, this is how we pray, or rather we say grace before we eat. What do we say? Lord, we thank you for the provision of daily bread. Please make it a blessing to our bodies and remind us to serve you with the strength we get from it. So that even the food we eat, we do it with a view to the service of God. My life is all about God. Surely it has to be. For you gave yourselves first to God, and because I am with God, everything about me is of God. Well, does that mean you take all your salary to the church? No. But you're saying, as much as I can spare, I will give to the service of God. At some point in my life, I did a calculation, and up to 40% of our general income went actively to the gospel. Actively. Now, if you put a law for me for 10%, are you doing me any service? And I'll give you reasons for that as we go along. So, true biblical giving, I say point number 4, only follows you giving of yourself first to God. So here is what I say to those people who tell me, Pastor, if we don't insist, they will not give. I say to them, the failure. And that's what I've been trying to do in this church actually. We haven't succeeded. Our giving is still not very good. All right? But it's been improving. What I'm trying to do here in this church is to deal with the hearts of people. I don't emphasize giving. We don't. In fact, Chris here will tell you that all we do is say, okay, now the announcements have been done. Let's have one hymn as we bring our offering and welcome the minister. That's it. I don't remember the last time somebody said, please give a good offering to the Lord. Please consider. Because we would imagine that if this person's heart is with the Lord, they thought carefully. And we'll come to that principle as well. They thought carefully at home, I'm going to church. What have I prepared to give to the Lord? I like the way my children act. My children ask me for an offering on Saturday night. It's interesting. We're going to church. Can we have the offering now? And we begin to think, okay, so here's the offering. You go. Because they are thinking about it in advance. And I think that's a good thing. I personally, as an individual, now I'm not going to tell you how much, but I have a definite amount I give every Sunday. Have to. If I have more, I'll give more. But I consider that a bare minimum. If I don't have, I don't have it. But that's what I want to give. Giving yourselves first to the Lord. And by the will of God then to us. You can only give yourselves to that which is being announced only after giving yourself to the Lord. So that principle number 4, perspective number 4. Verse 6, accordingly, we add Titus that as he had started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. Now, I'll talk about this principle later, but I need to announce it here as well as principle number 5, perspective number 5. Now, Paul has identified themselves in verse 5 as they gave themselves to us. Is that plural? Is that plural? Yes. He now mentions another individual who is involved in the us, in the collection. That individual is called Titus. What Paul is saying is, I wasn't that mighty man of God who collects offering by himself. There were other witnesses. There were other workers in the collection of public offering. In other words, biblical giving is accountable giving. Biblical giving is accountable giving. Oh, brothers and sisters, you might probably be familiar with this. There are many churches that I know about where the guy who actually handles the offering is the pastor alone. That is unbiblical. That is unbiblical. There has to be accountability. In our church here, we try. In fact, we try. I never collect offering. Never. I never count offering. All that I'm given at the end of the year by the secretaries is the accounts, records. I go through them. I call an eldership meeting. We say, this is the funds, because we're getting ready, for example, I think somewhere in end of this month, December, or beginning of January, we will make a public announcement here of the whole year. This is the much that was collected. This was what was spent. Our account as of this date reads this much. So people know. Okay. That's when I get involved with the offering. Or when there's amount to be withdrawn from the bank, I have the checkbook, I write the check has to be countersigned by 2 other people. Without their signature, money cannot be withdrawn. Accountable, because it's public money. But accountable also means that the congregation understands the workings of the church in terms of finances. You know, it's a terrible thing when people are in the dark. I was talking to a young man, just take the example and then we'll relate it to the church, who says to me, Pastor, I can never disclose my income to my wife. I said, okay, that's interesting. My wife doesn't know how much I earn, doesn't know what's in my account at all, because I cannot show her that. And the reason why he was telling me this is there is a problem with money in the house. The wife wants more. The man says he doesn't have it. Now I asked him, how does she know that you don't have it if you've not shared what you have? I mean, she's not an angel. She's not able to see. So if she knows your salary, by the way, it's amazing that there are some wives and husbands who don't know what the spouse is earning. I said, that's a terrible thing, isn't it? The same thing happens in church. You keep pushing people. Giving is horrible in this church. But they don't know how much is being given. We don't know. No announcement. No breaking down. Accountable giving. I say to you, there are some times when, in fact, the pastor, I remember when we were still starting out, there was 3 people, 4 people, you know, they are all still relatively new believers. I would still count the offering. Now that's acceptable. But when God brings people that are reasonable, isn't it? That can be given responsibility. As soon as you can, release that function to other people. And not to your wife, please. And not to your son. And not to your aunt. People that are not related with you. And even those must be several. So today, if the auditors should come and should call me, I should say, please don't ask me that question. Can I give you the numbers of secretary? Yes. Here, ask the question. They'll give you the books. If you need me for any other thing, please do. But they should answer those things because they know it better than I do. Better than I do. And so, biblical giving is accountable giving. This is important. This is important. And you start this early enough. It will surprise you how encouraged people will be when they know the status of the church. They know we close the year with only 2,000 shillings in the account, isn't it? And then there is a need now for 40,000. Well, they know there's only 2,000 in the account. So where would this other 13,000 come from? Our pockets. Then you will see them beginning to form caucuses. Brothers, what do we do now? Because they are clear. But they don't know. Did we collect 100,000 last year? You know? By the way, even this fundraiser that happened, people don't come back, and I think that's a terrible thing. You've gotten people to a fundraising, they've raised 500,000, for example, 500,000. They just see a few bricks there, you know, some fundis around here. They don't know. And sometimes, shamefully, I've sat in committees like that, shamefully, where the leadership, because of course we Pentecostals and Charismatics choose people ourselves. In fact, the pastor chooses yes men and women to surround him. And sometimes they are what we call sycophants. No, you say sycophants, you don't say sycophant. You must watch Willis, the word master, okay? Sycophant. They want to make the pastor happy. They want to earn favor. So they say, no, brothers, you know, we've collected 200,000. But you know, our pastor has been looking for a motorbike for a very long time. You know, it's not good. This building project is still here. We will still collect more money. So what I suggest we do, let's take out 70,000, give it to the pastor, okay? He's our pastor, you know. And people are like, yes, yes, so that they make the pastor happy. In the process, they are being unfaithful to the congregation of God. And when the leadership has decided, will the congregation oppose? That's abusing the Lord's church. No accountability. I have seen cases where the pastor comes to borrow money from the fundraising. To borrow. Just give it to me, I'll return it. Because this project is still far away. I'll return it later. And you know, okay? So you let him pay, but if he's not paying, nobody's asking him. And he's not paying, and you all know silently, and you move on. You try to find a way to cover. And some of them will even volunteer to cover it themselves. And it becomes such a horrible way of doing things. Biblical giving is accountable giving. Just the mere presence of the fact that Paul is with Titus, and not just the two of them, there are others overseeing this giving, is such an important thing.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
On that point, Who has the final authority on how to spend that giving?
That what?
That giving.
The church, as a body corporate, as a gathered community. Obviously, the church expresses itself through its leadership, doesn't it? What we tend to do here in this church, sort of just give you an illustration so you concretize that in your mind. For example, we're going to have a Reformation conference, all right? And the church will sit and they'll say, well, what's our budget? What's our budget? And we usually have a service and hospitality committee, ladies and gentlemen who know the budgeting. We will ask them, please go do a budgeting, and usually the pastor is not there, usually even the deacons are not there. These are people who are used to doing these things. They budget. Then they bring that budget to us. We form a church committee, not pastors and deacons, no. General church committee. Or after business meeting, yes. And the budget is read. This is the budget. This is what will be spent on charcoal. This is what will be spent on We need a cow. We need blah, 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 blah. It's read publicly and people are invited. Do you want to make corrections? And usually people say, no, last time we used, say 20 liters of cooking oil, but we were told to supplement that money because it wasn't enough. So can we add 10 liters to that, please? And there's a consensus, it's added. Or last time we had too much firewood, and then we spent money there that we should have spent over here. Can we reduce the firewood this time from 4,000, say, to 3,000? Those corrections are made in a general. And then we say, can we approve that budget? Yes, it is approved. And then we say, next Sunday, can people then pledge themselves to that budget? And somebody says, no, I'll take that cow. Oh, I'll take that cooking oil. Oh, I'll take the wheat flour. Oh, I'll take this. It's the whole church. So the decision to come up with the budget was the church's decision. The decision of how much to raise the budget was the church's decision. And then we usually select. And you've attended a meeting like that, Chris? Have you attended a meeting like that in this church? Good. So we also choose departmental leaders. So who are the people going to be involved with purchases? Who are going to be involved with the store? We usually have a storekeeper and an assistant with a clear inventory of things that are put in the store. Who are going to be the service ladies and men and blah, 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 blah. All those, they are chosen in the general meeting. So obviously, even the people that spend the money. And then we have a system here, we call it the petty cash voucher system. It was surprising. These vouchers are 30 bob from bookshop. Before you who is told to go buy, say, rice, you come for money, you go to somebody, maybe the conference manager, writes for your voucher. We need the money that was budgeted for rice to be given to this brother. Your name is written there, then there are 3 signatories there, the last is mine. Countersign. You have authority to spend that money, isn't it? Then we have a receipt coming to attach that voucher, it's there. At the end of the conference, the leadership sits down, audits the conference, and then we report to the church. This is how we spent money. So whose decision? It's the church's decision. But the church cannot leave all of us like this, going to the shop. So after we make the decision, we say, so and so will be responsible for this, but it's very clear how that money will be spent and accounted for. These are small things, but they matter. They matter. They really do. They really do. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other question? We're still going on. Was that principle number 5 or 4? 5. Okay. Go ahead. Is that accountable giving? Correct. Go ahead. The ministry? Yes. Sure. Of course. Of course.
So it's not easy to persuade or just tell them that this thing happened when, or if the church questions, what takes place it is not easy because the church is not the pastors. So as a leader in church, you are
So is there a question there?
So I'm saying it isn't also easy in South Africa.
Sure, and I'm agreeing with you, Mary. But do you notice that you're dealing with a more fundamental issue there? You've already sort of answered yourself there when you began by saying these are their churches, their ministries. I never considered at any one time that GMM Mumias is my ministry. Not even Wisdom Training Center. It's not my ministry. It surely is not. If it's the Lord's church, now again I say to you, Mary, and the rest of you, it points to a more fundamental problem. Problem number one, what do we think of the church? Well, biblically, we should think of the church as the body of Christ. And who is the head of the church? Christ. I'm a manager here, and I will give account for how these things run here. In that sense, then, I'm accountable to God and to the people of God. I'm a servant of the people. You know, Jesus, when he thinks of the church leaders, this is Mark chapter 10, verse 42 to verse 45. It says church leadership must not be like political leadership. And Jesus says in Mark 10 from verse 42, the kings of this world boss it over their people. And then the next words are very strong. He says, it shall not be so among you. For he who is the greatest among you must be the servant of all. And then he gives himself as an example, even as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. So what he's telling us is that the pastor should be a servant to the people. I should do things in a manner that helps the people, gives confidence to the people. I think the next question, Mary, that is a very genuine question. I don't think we ask this question often enough and seriously enough, is whether in fact we are part of a legitimate church if we're in a church like that. Should I be in a church where the pastor uses money the way he wants and still think that's a church? No. Because the New Testament pattern is biblical giving is accountable giving. If I find a pastor who is not accountable, we cannot tell where the church offerings are going, what they are doing. I should not be part of that church. The first thing I should do is to question. And obviously, you know what will happen if you question. In fact, that is where things really get hairy. Question other things, but money. Don't question that one. But that should give you an indication you're in the wrong place. For the love of money is the root of all. Where there is love of money, you can be sure, on the basis of scripture, that there are other evils going on. For scripture says, you cannot serve God and mammon at the same time. Mammon is money, wealth. So if the pastor, if the leadership is not straight on money, believe it, you can take this to the bank. They are not faithful in many other things as well. So the question becomes, should you be part of that church? And that's now an individual question. We've tried to answer it before, haven't we? And it's a choice you make. So I do not think that problem has to do with what they're doing now. It has to do with their philosophy of ministry. Bring all the money at the apostles' feet, isn't it? Walileta kwa miguu ya. What they don't tell you is that when they were brought that way, they were distributed among the people, so that everyone who had need was taken care of here. They don't say that. No. They say it's the apostle that you bring money to.